So the other thing is, so that for me was a concern. But having said that, I have experienced, when I came in, exceptional goodwill from surprising corners of society. People reaching out, looking up, checking in on our welfare, making sure we had the practical supports we needed. These were parents I met at school or families I met at the park when I took my boys. At that time, my daughter wasn't on this planet, and so on and so forth. So hospitality was a big thing. And so we chose, even as much as we were settling in and didn't have much income, to welcome people and from the neighborhood into our home freely. Yeah. So we found our place became a haven for the neighborhood kids. They would just walk in the door and want to try out our African food, cornmeal, or they like the way my wife prepared the sauces and so on. But they also found familiar foods on the table. The fact that they could come in the door, that was big. The idea of people choosing happiness is a choice. And the idea of choosing to be happy regardless of the circumstances. We're well endowed, but I think we've lost that sense of joy and pleasure with life. So that's one of the things I'd like to do. So laughter is a good thing and it's a rare thing in this context. So in a light-hearted way, that's my own reflection. But my formative experiences, given the context that I grew up in, I felt gifted me with a more sophisticated sense, maybe, and awareness of the world that I was coming into than the world that I was coming into was prepared for.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Hello, I'm Monisha. I'm the podcast host of Newcomers to Trailblazers, and this is Matilda. Today, we have a co host. Matilda is the founder of Sisters in Canada Wellness Society. You must have seen an episode with her previously. We interviewed her, she shared about her personal experience, and I realized while she shared about her personal experience, the culture that she references, the African culture, let's be clear, Africa is a continent, it's not a country.
It's not a country. Yeah. Yes.
It's a continent, and she is from Nigeria, am I right?
Yes.
Yeah, yes. See, I have good memory.
She does.
So, when she mentioned about her culture, I realized, you know what? We are missing out on talking about these wonderful African countries and African cultures. So, this February for Black History Month, we are going to invite the most amazing heroes in the Black society, also Canadian immigrants, onto our podcast. And today we have Jonathan from UMOJA Operations and Compassion Society. I am so excited. And I am so excited to do this with Matilda, my very good friend. I'm trying to become her best friend. There are some barriers.
Thank you for having me.
There are some
There are no barriers. No barriers. But seriously, thanks for letting me do this with you.
Yes.
I am so excited to do this with beautiful, talented, intelligent Monisha. You guys know, right?
Yeah.
You follow her, you see all her videos every morning. So thank you, Monisha.
Thank you
for letting me do this special series with you.
Oh,
so yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
So today we will be capturing two formats of questions. One that will talk about the African culture, different countries, different cultures, different tribes, different languages, etc., etc. And I will not be asking those questions because I'm not African enough. Okay. So if I ask those questions, it would not just be disrespectful, it would be stupid. So I would like to excuse myself and give Matilda the opportunity to ask those questions. However, the advantage I have is I am also a Canadian immigrant. So I can ask those questions away. Woohoo. All right.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you, Jonathan, for joining us today. It's really good to have you with us.
Before we jump into the culture and Canadian experience and all of that, who are you? Tell us about you.
Who am I? Okay. Let's see. I serve as executive director for UMOJA Operation Compassion Society. UMOJA is a 23-year-old charity, originally founded by Amos and Edith Kabere, refugee migrants from Uganda originally. Amos in I forget now, it's been quite a while, but had been voted in at the age of 26 as the youngest member of parliament in the country's history.
Wow.
He then immediately thereafter suffered political persecution and had to get out of his country, and has raised his boys here locally. But based on his settlement experience, he felt it was imperative for him to start an organization to help newcomers, multi-barrier newcomers, to settle successfully and holistically in Canada. That was inspired by he nearly lost his children at some point. They were nearly taken away over a misunderstanding, and there's a whole backstory to that. And so he realized that he and his wife had unique advantages coming into this country. They had some education, they had a sense of the world, and yet they suffered that particular incident, one particular defining incident, that inspired them to pound the streets. And UMOJA was started in the basement of their home, actually. Fast forward 23 years later, we have served over 4,000 families and counting. So that's huge. So my job is the easiest. The hardest work was done by our founders. So that's what I do. I'm originally from Kenya. I came to Canada in 2002, literally the same year UMOJA was founded, a month before. So perhaps it's destiny, I don't know. And so after having worked in the private sector for a while, I then fell into social work.
Okay.
And and I linked back with UMOJA. I had a sense of the backstory. I have 3 grown children, 2 boys and a girl, ages 28, 25, and 20 in that. And the girl was born in Canada. The boys were 5 and 2.5 when we originally came. So there's a lived experience for me as well, which kind of informs the work that I do.
Okay. Wow.
That's great.
That
That's really interesting.
Okay.
The story and the story of UMOJA. Do you want to tell us why the name UMOJA? What does UMOJA really mean?
Yeah, UMOJA is Swahili which is a language spoken in sub-Saharan Africa. If you drew a diagonal from West Africa down to Mozambique, that defines the Swahili-speaking concentration in Africa, and it means, the word UMOJA means unity or oneness. It evokes the idea of unity in the home, in the community, and in the nation. So we thought it was appropriate. There's an interesting detail though. Swahili is an amalgamation of many languages. It is formed of the Bantu group of languages spoken along that diagonal I mentioned, but also is a roughly 35% Arabic. And it was a trade language because East Africa, particularly where that language is most concentrated, and into the Congo, there's a lot of history lost, but those regions have historically traded with the Middle East and Asia for centuries, even before the Europeans happened on the scene. But having said that, depending on who called the shots at any one time, the language has Portuguese in it. It has Hindi, Gujarati, Punjabi. It has so all these influences. So we thought it would be a phenomenal, if you like, way to encapsulate what we are about.
Okay.
That's what our founders thought. I came on the scene later, but it's my national language too because I was born and raised in Kenya.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Swahili is also called Kiswahili, right?
Kiswahili, right.
Yeah.
And that's
What's Kiswahili?
Kiswahili is the full name of the language. People just shorten it to call it Swahili.
And the root word, I believe, is Swahili, or something like that, akin to that, which is, my Arabic is not that great, which means coast. So it's Swahili. So you get it evokes that same essence.
Okay.
Yeah.
I particularly like the fact that the meaning of the UMOJA word is unity and oneness. Considering what I mean, from my own experience of what UMOJA does, because I've been opportunity to be able to, hear from Jonathan about a lot of the things. And I'm looking forward to people hearing about a lot of the things you guys do. But yes, it's really interesting. I've always asked, it's such a unique name. So really coming to understand. And when you have to work with newcomers from different places, it's important that we actually, have that sense of unity. So that's great.
That's right. It's good it's essential to have a unifying ethos, given the multicultural context that we live in.
Okay, so knowing that Monisha is my boss today, can I ask my next question?
Yes, please. Over to you.
Okay, so Mike, this question is, it's basically, can you share a specific example of how your African cultural heritage has shaped your values, beliefs, or worldview? And how does that differ from what you've observed in the Canadian society today?
Yeah, it's such a loaded question, isn't it?
It is.
I did my work, eh?
It is.
I approach, but my formative experiences, given the context that I grew up in, I felt gifted me with a more sophisticated sense, maybe, and awareness of the world that I was coming into than the world that I was coming into was prepared for. So there's that.
Very good point.
That's a deep line.
Yeah.
That's funny.
That is going to become the quote of the day.
Yeah.
I'm going to put your picture then.
Exactly. The world that I'm coming into was less prepared for me. You were more prepared for the world we're coming
I
into.
feel that, and so I feel that, as a cultural ambassador of sorts, I feel a sense of responsibility to help society to understand itself better as it understands me, and so on, and in a way that affirms and that doesn't alienate, the person across the aisle from me. But having said that, because I don't want to get lost here, we'll go down a rabbit hole, and then I'll never be able to bring you out. I think for me, the biggest tension has been around almost I think we take ourselves a little too seriously, Canada. We're well endowed and provided for as a society. Where I grew up, it's a more stratified society, and it's not egalitarian like the Canadian society. So people don't have equal access to opportunity and so on. And sometimes those extremes, have a bearing. So I have learned to, I feel that, one, hospitality is a big thing that is practiced back home. I recall when the first barbecue that I was invited to in Canada, my host cited as we walked in how many burgers we were all entitled to. Well, where I grew up,
that is offensive. It was offensive.
Very offensive. My God.
Even in Indian culture.
Listen, it was my first week here. Why didn't he ask me to bring food along?
Exactly. What?
I would have been happy to do that. So the other thing is, so that for me was a concern. But having said that, I have experienced, when I came in, exceptional goodwill from surprising corners of society. People reaching out, looking up, checking in on our welfare, making sure we had the practical supports we needed. These were parents I met at school or families I met at the park when I took my boys. At that time, my daughter wasn't on this planet, and so on and so forth. So hospitality was a big thing. And so we chose, even as much as we were settling in and didn't have much income, to welcome people and from the neighborhood into our home freely.
Yeah.
So we found our place became a haven for the neighborhood kids. They would just walk in the door and want to try out our African food, cornmeal, or they like the way my wife prepared the sauces and so on. But they also found familiar foods on the table. The fact that they could come in the door, that was big. The idea of people choosing happiness is a choice. And the idea of choosing to be happy regardless of the circumstances. We're well endowed But I think we've lost that sense of joy and pleasure with life. So that's one of the things I'd like to do. So laughter is a good thing and it's a rare thing in this context. So in a light-hearted way, that's my own reflection along those lines.
I totally agree about the laughter thing because
I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, you definitely are making sense.
You are making more sense.
You're making that than I thought. Because the truth is, when you talk about the laughter thing, especially, that's something I noticed when we first moved. Like where we come from, you want to just say hi to people on the street, smile, but I used to say, I don't know if it's a Vancouver thing though, or if it's a Canadian thing, But when I went to Toronto, it was quite different. Like you're walking on the street and you lift your head to say hi, and someone looks away, right?
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I don't know what Monisha has to say to that, but yes, I totally agree.
Something that I agree is, I think many Asian cultures, South Asian, East Asian, Southeast Asian, or African cultures, hospitality is a very big thing. And like you rightly mentioned, people come home all the time. Friends used to come home, my relatives used to come home, extended family members used to come home. And I remember when I was a child, me being smart enough and all of that, because I wanted mathematics in my life. And then I went and asked people how many, like you asked, instead of burger, we call it roti. So how many do you want? And I remember the day my mom kicked my butt.
Oh, she did.
Oh my God. And that day, I was very young at the time. I think 10 years
You
old.
did the wrong thing by asking how many they want.
Yeah, that was rude. I didn't know that. I was very young. And then I realized when I grew up, okay, so these are not the questions you ask, right? When you grow up to understand it.
You let people take.
Yeah, you let people take. And thank you for mentioning that. And I have had people who come in with food and go back with the food they brought in if there are leftovers. I am like, nah. That ain't half. They bring their wine, they take their wine back.
Oh my God.
And they bring their food. Oh, we have leftovers. Oh, I should take it back home. Like, oh, okay. That was really weird.
You know what I realized that some of those details in my my own humble reflection, and I go back home from time to time. Well, back to Kenya. Home is where you are.
Yeah.
I realized that as the middle class grows and is growing rapidly, you would know that's good. As much as it is a stratified society, there's a sense in which there's an increasing trickle-down effect where people are, there's more equity across the system. Of course, sometimes it feels like you're moving 5 steps back and 10 back, 5 forward and 10 back. But I find that as a society modernizes, and people are less dependent on each other. My neighbor, who's of Portuguese background, recently, surprised me one day several years back when she walked across the street and asked for salt. Because she'd run out of salt, it was late. The meal was almost done, and I thought this is special. Because I grew up, doing that.
Does that happen?
My own parents, my own mother doing that, and exchanging that kind of spontaneous generosity with neighbors. So I find that community members of society that grow up in a way that is similar to what we have, the way we live here, tend to be prone to the same sort of approach to life. Because you're less dependent, you're more independent, you are well provided for. So I find that people are not as connected at that level. It's not surprising to find people don't know their neighbors these days when I go back, especially in the cosmopolitan areas. So I think that's a universal dynamic. And society is becoming more homogeneous across the world, or homogeneous depending on how you spin that. So that's why I say sometimes I approach that with a bit of caution, because it's not a Canadian thing. It's more the way societies evolve at times. And it's good to be reminded and go back, I guess, to maybe some of those values so that we're doing better and we're thriving.
Great.
Mind blown.
Yeah. I'm confusing everybody here.
Oh my God. No. It's just, I think it's what your responses have really helped push us in some kind of reflective mode. So I just see myself, going back and forth, trying to reflect on some of the things that you're saying. And I'm sure our viewers are going to find that really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I know you've mentioned quite a couple of things that has to do with this next question I'm about to ask. And it says, Monisha really did a lot of work in this question, seriously. Okay. How do you navigate maintaining connections to your African heritage, which is, I know you've mentioned some of those, while living in Canada? Do you find any challenges in preserving your traditions and customs in your new environment?
Yeah, it's a fair question. That's a very good question. There's a large Kenyan community in BC and fairly well organized. Connected. So I wouldn't say that in terms of the essentials around, essential cultural essence, I don't think that has been necessarily at risk for me. And my children, for instance, have been immersed in that community fairly well. So I think that's worked out much better than I would have expected. And people get together often in social settings and solidarity spaces, weddings, the Kenyan Society of British Columbia brings people together around national holidays and so on that would have been celebrated back home, like Independence Day and so on. So that's exceptional. People get together in the summer and share a meal, break bread together. That's huge. So I think that's worked out much better than I would have expected.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
But of course, part of the challenge too is given where Kenya is placed geographically, but also historically.
Geographically, it's in the east of Africa, so you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just, the Horn of Africa, just beneath that.
Yeah.
And we've had trade and interactions with the Middle East and Asia for centuries. As I mentioned before, the Europeans came, and you see those influences reflected in the way we do life. I don't think there's such a thing as an absolute Kenyan culture, but there's certain shared values and cues and so on that identify a Kenyan. You walk into a space and there's certain, things that you expect to come through, to show through. So having said that in a sense primes us better. We tend to take a pragmatic approach to, how we interact cross-culturally. Of course, that's a good and a bad thing. There's a risk of
offending people.
There's a risk of maybe losing a bit of your core self.
That's true.
And allowing that to be, taken over by maybe stronger influences around you, more dominant influences. But by and large, we have a good sense of ourselves. But we don't take ourselves too seriously, like I said. We're not reckless about life. We're intentional, as others are. Yeah.
Thank you. That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you have any to say to that?
I would say, moving from one country to another, many mistakes that you are losing on your culture. Many mistake that. The point is, we are trying to find a middle ground where you can sustain in the culture that you are moving into and the culture that you are from. For example, celebrating Christmas. Now, I'm not Christian. That does not mean I won't celebrate Christmas. There is food. There is fun. There are games. There is Christmas tree. Why would I not celebrate that?
There are lights. Why wouldn't you be part of that fun?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Christmas lights. Now, do I celebrate the religious parts? I welcome people to celebrate it with me. I will learn more. But that is not going to stop me from trying out a new culture.
Right.
But when we do that, the challenge you face is back home, you're losing on your culture and you're trying to adapt into somebody else's culture is how it is. The misconception lies. And I wouldn't say it actually disappoints me, for people to realize that you have to leave something to gain something new, that I don't agree with. And it is amazing to see there is a strong Kenyan presence here in BC, specifically. BC is British Columbia. So, strong Kenyan presence here. And people come together for celebrations, just like I think a lot of countries have presence here. There is Indian society, there is a Filipino society, I'm sure there is a Nigerian society somewhere, there is a Kenyan society. Nigeria is in the western part of Africa, Kenya is in the eastern part of Africa, different countries, different cultures, different languages. Just so you know.
I love having this sit with Monisha. She's always giving like facts and and letting our audience know this is this, just in case you missed that. Yeah. So yes.
Kenya is half the size of British Columbia. Now, Kenya is not small. It's Canada, but it's large.
Yeah. The landscape is large.
The landscape. And we have 68 languages spoken in that country and Nigeria in many ways is like that, only much larger geographically. So for us, it's concentrated in that comparatively small space. So there you go. So in a sense, the idea of multiculturalism is not new. Is not new to a lot of Kenyans. And Africa and the African diaspora, persons of African descent, and broadly speaking, the Black community is perhaps singularly the most diverse community in British Columbia in our context. If you care to look, besides the superficial references that people make to identify, a community. But in the aggregate, we're extremely diverse, and I can relate to that idea because I grew up in Kenya, and that's good because it's like I position it this way. It's like the whole idea of an antibody. You have a little bit of the bug in your system, and I felt I had that coming to Canada, and I think a lot of Africans and African diaspora would argue the same. You have a little bit of the bug in your system, which prepares you, and it helps you be more open and not be defined by fear as you reach across the aisle to maybe immerse yourself in other experiences. It doesn't have to take away it, and culture is dynamic, so it enriches your whole outlook on life if we are open to it. But if we're defined by fear of the other, life is not as interesting, I think.
Yeah,
that's true.
Perfect.
That's perfect. That's so true. Okay, actually, really touched point on some conversations that we're really not having these days. And sincerely, hospitality is big deal, and I think that's something that somehow we are kind of losing.
Yeah.
When we're trying to place that balance between where we come from and these spaces. So yes, I'm really grateful that, that's something you're conscious about and bringing it up. Just when I say I'm in that reflective mode, I mean it. Like I'm really thinking about it because back home, nobody calls you when they're coming to your house. People just show up and you have to be ready to entertain them. Like if you are always ready, and if they show up and you don't have something, it's not, there's that understanding. That's right. People just want to come and spend time with you. I can just get up and go and drop my kids for my friend and they're not going to say no to me. So that's big part, it's really big deal. Like you have to think about it. Does she want to see me? Does he want to see me? Would they be home? Would they be ready to receive us? And then sometimes when you want to send a text, okay, we're coming, you're thinking, should I not? So those are things that we really want to really bring back. So yes, I absolutely agree with you. So thank you so much for the perspectives, the philosophical angle you brought to this. This is great.
Okay.
The philosophical rabbit hole.
Yes.
So we have spoken about a lot of how your Kenyan culture compares with Canadian culture and how you have already as an immigrant integrated that into part of your culture, like a mixed Kenyan and BC culture. So I'm going to ask, because we have already spoken about certain parts, I'm going to ask one specific question to you. How has your experience as a Black immigrant in Canada shaped your perspective on diversity, inclusion, and equity?
Yeah, that's a good one. Allow me, I'm even going to refer to some reflection here.
He has come prepared.
It's always good. I mean, these are difficult questions here. But but they're good questions. They're essential questions. And I think it's great. It's been great for my own reflection, for sure. I think I feel a responsibility to serve as a cultural ambassador. That's huge. I feel a sense of responsibility, partly because there isn't as much awareness about my essence as a person. People have certain concepts or none at all. They're just, and I think a bit of curiosity, intellectual curiosity, we need to develop. In a world that is increasingly alike, we need to develop a sophisticated sense of our surroundings. That's, we owe it to ourselves so that we can go past the superficial. I feel, for me, being, and I know, Black History Month is coming, honestly, and that's a closely felt conversation. I feel a responsibility that, for me, and holding space on behalf of my community is not an end in itself. I like to believe I don't wear a chip on my shoulder as much as I can help it. We all obviously have our concerns in that regard. So what I do is I believe that I need to be an agent for positive change, for, this notion of UMOJA, of oneness in community. And I feel that responsibility so that I leverage my lived experience, not just to look out for my own, but to take an interest in the welfare of even people who don't look like me, who may not see, and compassion and grace to those who may not see the world from my own lens, through my own lens. Or at least from my own perspective. So I feel that responsibility to model what inclusion and allyship. You hear those terms thrown around in the nonprofit sector, but they mean something at the end of the day. We are finding new ways to frame these issues, and that's a good thing. So we want to leverage that. Avoiding cultural myopia, I'll just throw that out. The idea of seeking solidarity, like I said, beyond my immediate community, encouraging others to develop that broad, inclusive perspective. I think that's huge. We're in a multicultural society right now. The demographic is shifting. Traditionally, immigrants to Canada were of European descent and were more alike. We're now living in a society where we have the potential to build perhaps the most competitive nation in the world. Who knows? By merging all these experiences and perspectives, we have an opportunity, but there's an inherent risk to that. Because if we don't care and are not intentional about building solidarity, this can be, if we start voting along tribal, I dare say tribal, we use that reference back home because it happens, along tribal or cultural lines, as opposed to voting on principle. If we only care for our own family and community, we won't like the place that we live. So I do feel that responsibility. And being somebody who has faced maybe discrimination sometimes, or who has been the outsider, from time to time, although my experience in Canada has been largely positive, I do feel that it's very important for me to promote that idea and that perspective.
I don't even need to ask any more questions because he has covered all of my questions. This is
very, very, very covered all of your questions.
Yeah, very deep question, very deep answer. So, standing up for other people needs to be practiced, and it is not innate. Humans usually try and protect themselves, try and protect their community, try and protect their family as an evolution in itself, right? That's animal evolved into human. We all try to protect ourselves, and having to stand up for somebody is not innate.
No, it's not.
Simple. And that has to be practiced intentionally.
That's right.
Right? That is why the word allyship means a lot.
Yes.
It is thrown around. I know people don't talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
The reason why allyship is spoken about is so you can realize that standing up for other people can not just uplift other people, it can uplift you as well, which is amazing, which is be an upstander, people. Be an upstander. Don't be a bystander. If you see a bully, call them out and stand up for other people. There is nothing wrong. You're not losing anything here. So it is good to stand up for other people. And thank you so much
and we try to project that through our work at UMOJA. UMOJA is cohort driven. We don't just, even though we are founded by Africans, people of African descent, we not only serve people of African descent, we've served different groups at, depending on who's coming to town and who needs our help at any one time. Right now, we're mostly serving 60%, 70% of our clients of Eritrean background because that's the largest group. The balance are Middle Eastern and Central Asian. Had you come to UMOJA before COVID, before the pandemic, you probably would have found at different times mostly Afghanis or people of Syrian background, and so on and so forth. So we've been intentional about that, and we hope to reflect that to perpetuate that I think redeeming kind of idea out there, to model that constantly, the way we hire, in who we serve, how we serve, and developing that sense of cultural awareness and competency is important to us. We feel that channels the spirit of our founding, and best reflects what Amos and Edith hoped for our community at large. And when I say our community, I mean in the collective, not just the Africans, but all people.
Yeah, all people. Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you. Like it's just like a mind-blowing eye-opener.
Yeah.
Deep reflections, all packed into one.
Yeah.
This is one episode that you cannot miss, sincerely. And I'm not doing the closing edits for Monisha, but I'm just like, this has been such an interesting and powerful conversation. And thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Honored to be here today.
This is more therapeutic, in fact.
Yes, it is.
I felt like I was going through therapy.
I am.
Listening to such wisdom and perseverance and honesty, I felt like I was in therapy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So everybody, this is Jonathan. I will link his LinkedIn, and wherever his UMOJA operations are present, I will link them. I will also make sure I link my co-host here, my favorite person. Do not forget to follow us on everywhere, basically.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Just follow. Make sure you follow. Hit follow.
Yeah. Hit subscribe on YouTube. We are also available on audio formats on Apple Podcast, YouTube, as well as Spotify. Oh, we recently started Amazon Music as well.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
She's so resourceful.
Yeah. I do everything. Yeah. I am the operations person. I am the marketing person.
She's the tech person.
I am the tech person. I am the founder. I am everything. Basically, I cannot afford to hire anybody.
But she can hire me. She just doesn't want to.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. See you on the next one.
Thank you.